Hi, everyone. Welcome to Buddhism Talks. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Buddhism and health. So, I'm going to start with a little bit of the philosophical background and some key concepts, but I'm also going to share my personal experience on the subject. And I'm hoping that my experience will make some of these theoretical concepts come to life. So I'm just going to step back to 2,500 years ago to the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, which is the Buddha that most people are aware of. And he's the one that identified four key sufferings, which are birth, sickness, old age, and death. And for those who've never heard of those four sufferings, birth is not labor pains. Birth signifies the fact that the minute you are born, most likely you will have some suffering in the life ahead. So those were the four. So Buddhism began with this search, with a seeking mind. It begins with a question. Why are people suffering? What can be done about it? And can we transform this suffering? Can we create anything positive or valuable from the suffering? Is there any growth that can happen or expansion that can come out of these sufferings? And this is part of his enlightenment, that with an enlightened life condition and the four qualities of enlightenment, these could be transformed into value. We've mentioned before that the four qualities of enlightenment are wisdom, courage, compassion, and life force. So, with that enlightened nature, any of those four sufferings can be faced, they can be dealt with, and they can be elevated into something that is valuable and causes growth. So, the next piece of theory that I'm going to cover, and I'm not going to do it in detail, but if you did want to study it in detail, there's a book called Unlocking the Mysteries of Birth and Death and Everything in Between, A Buddhist View of Life by Daisaku Ikeda. And I think you can get that almost anywhere online. So this has a lot of detail on the Buddhist view of life and death and illness and everything in between, as the title says. So I'm not going to spend time going into all the details on this. So I am going to give you a very quick rundown of the causes of illness according to Buddhism. So there's three groupings. One is diseases of the body. The second is diseases of the mind. And the third is karmic disease. So the first one, diseases of the body, is really about imbalances inside the body, imbalance with the environment. So diseases of the body is broken down into four things. The first one is a disharmony of the four elements, and that basically means disharmony inside the body. So it could be diabetes, where your body can't balance things anymore. It could be disharmony with the environment, something like allergies, where things in the environment are causing disharmony. The second one is improper eating or drinking. So that actually has its own subhead in terms of how important it is. So the third one is poor posture. And I know that doesn't seem like a very serious one, but I can tell you that I know somebody right now who, because of their poor posture, has shifted the placement of their rib. So it can be a problem. And the third one is technically called attack of demons. Now, whenever you hear that kind of a term, demons, devils, whatever, in Buddhism, please remember this is a really old philosophy, and it's important to understand what those terms mean. So whenever things like demons or devilish functions are used, it's simply talking about negative forces, right? It could be, if it's devilish functions in our own life, it could be our own negativity. It could be us complaining and criticizing. It could be fear. It could be anything that diminishes life. So that's basically the attack of demons. In the realm of health, what this is simply viruses, bacteria, things from the environment, negative forces from the environment that make us sick and cause imbalance. So that's the four. The second one is diseases of the mind. That's clearly mental health. So the third one is karmic disease. Karmic disease is considered something that is made in the past lifetime. So if you don't believe in past lifetimes, one way to get comfortable with this concept is to think about the fact that when you're born, based on your culture, your DNA, your parents' DNA, you might have certain predispositions to illness. So it's not something that was created or made in this lifetime. It has a deeper origin from the past and comes with you as soon as you are born. So those are the three causes of illness from a Buddhist perspective. And you can see it's basically disharmonies. And even the mental health one is a disharmony between mind and body, right? It's an imbalance. So that's Causes of Illness. If you want to know more, you can read the book. The reason that's relevant right now is if you look at illness as disharmonies, as disconnections between mind and body, that means that part of the solution is going to be harmony. Part of the solution is going to be fixing the imbalance, and whatever that imbalance looks like. And it's also going to be about going deeper. It's going deeper than your karma. Because in this Buddhism, we really believe that we can change all karma, immutable, mutable. And it doesn't mean that the actual illness completely changes. There's certain things that you're born with. There's certain things that we have that we're not going to be able to fundamentally change in this life. The aspect that we can change when it comes to the immutable karma is what we do with it, how we experience it, how we respond to it, how it affects our life. That's the aspect that we have some ability in. So now I'm going to say a few words about Buddhism and medical science and reassure everybody that they work together. They have the exact same goal, they have a slightly different focus. So medical science focuses on knowledge, whereas Buddhism focuses on wisdom and life force. So the reason wisdom and life force are important, if we have that quality, if we have that ability to have wisdom, we can balance our lives better, we can strengthen our life force, and by doing so, we can use medical knowledge as an aid in the process of healing ourselves. Both a high life condition and wisdom would be incredibly valuable. With a high life condition, you can move forth positively. You would be able to galvanize inner strength. And with wisdom, this would be a great aid in using the best of the medical knowledge when you're selecting physicians, treatments, any of that, and also be able to make the best use of any of the other supports around and access some of the things that maybe you wouldn't have thought of if you were only using your mental intellect. So that's the two. Now, I quickly just want to read the quotes about what the Buddhist view of health is. And the reason I say, oh, everybody can have this, because it's a different, very expansive view of health. It is much more than an absence of illness. So, real health is the will to overcome every form of adversity and use even the worst of circumstances as a springboard for new growth and development. Simply put, the essence of health is the constant renewal and rejuvenation of life. So, it is much more than just not being sick. It's the ability to continually renew oneself and make the most out of everything that comes our way. He says true health is found in a positive attitude toward life that refuses to be defeated by anything. A truly healthy life is creative, one in which we keep challenging something, creating something, and moving forward to expand our horizons as long as we live. Health in Buddhism comes from having a powerful spirit and a philosophy that strengthens us and helps us to be greater than we imagined. So it is not about the diagnosis or the condition or any of the physical aspects of your life. It's much more about how you are living and your inner attitude to life and how you experience the world and how you contribute to the world. So, up until now, this is quite a bit of theory. So, I do want to mention at this point that in 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then a couple of months later, I was diagnosed with potentially tumors on my kidney and on my lung. And I can tell you that the second diagnosis made the breast cancer look like a vacation in Jamaica because I knew what a triple organ cancer meant. If I had a cancer in my lung, in my kidney, and in my breast, I'm thinking 2 years, basically hasta la vista, baby, after that. That's what I felt. And so I put all of this to the test at that time. And that was what, now 5 years ago. I'm clearly still around. So I am going to tell you a little bit more about what happened. However, I do want to mention one of the concepts that helped me so much in that experience. So, one of the things that really inspired me at that time and completely transformed the experience was this idea that there are two dimensions to illness. There is the physical aspect of illness, which is obviously in the realm of the doctors and other treatments and other approaches. But there's this second realm, where Buddhism gives me 100% control. So the other aspect is called the devil of illness in Buddhism. So don't get scared. It's not actually talking about devils. It's talking about that aspect of life that really drains all of our positive healing energy. So it is the spiritual aspect of illness that can cause us to sink into despair, to give up on life, to lose strength to go on living. It drains people of their vitality and acts as a robber of life. That's why we're going to call it a vampire, because it's this aspect where, like, a diagnosis can cause you to just see the end, to feel weak, to think it's over, even though 1 minute you felt great and you're enjoying life and everything was wonderful and you were hugging your kids and walking your dog. And all of a sudden, you've been given a diagnosis and all of that energy's gone. And it's definitely not good for fighting your illness and transforming it. So it was, for me, it was really powerful to recognize this aspect of illness, to see like, oh, this is happening. This is something very real. And yet it's something that I can change. I have 100% control over it. Like, that's the amazing thing. Because once you can control that aspect, all the other stuff is going to work much better. In fact, that drain of spiritual power and life energy can actually be much more dangerous sometimes than the physical illness itself. So the important thing is to recognize it and absolutely decide not to be defeated by it. And this is where I felt so incredibly lucky. So what was great in my experience is, on day one, I had full vampire effect. So I basically had despair, I had fear, I had tears. I thought, oh no, I'm never going to see my daughter get married. How long have I got to live? All of that sadness just kicked into my body. So that was the first day. And on the second day, that was very different for two reasons. First of all, I do have a strong Buddhist practice. So I sat down and I started to chant. I read what I needed to read and was reminded that I absolutely could not be defeated. There was no way I could let any of this vampire stuff get into my system, because I needed everything I could to be able to move forward and heal and transform this whole experience. So I was very lucky for another thing. I had my mother's example, who was also a very strong practicing Buddhist. Years earlier, she had been diagnosed with an incredibly aggressive cancer. It had grown under her neck, and in about 6 weeks, it went from the size of a plum to the size of a melon. And they had said if she didn't do the treatment, she'd be dead in a year. And even if she did do the treatment, she would definitely die of cancer. Luckily, because of a variety of fortunate circumstances, she ended up in the hands of one of the best surgeons, probably in North America. And he was able to do microscopic surgery and get everything out. And he did just an incredible job. And then after that, she had decided that she was going to overcome this no matter what. So her response to the diagnosis after the surgery was to say, he doesn't know how long I'm going to live. Who does he think he is? God? And so she completely, beat down the vampire. There was no vampire effect in her. She just decided, I am going to chant 2 to 3 hours a day, because that's not really that much when you're fighting for your life and somebody told you might be dead in a year. So she was like, that's it. I'm going to spend hours to be really strong spiritually, physically. She took a ton of different actions, changed her diet, exercise, did everything she possibly could. And she got so much better that within 3 months, I was able to take her to Europe. So I'd planned this trip to Europe because I thought she might die within the year. So we went to Italy and France, and it was just the most incredible trip. And the doctors had told us that there's no way she was going to be able to go on that trip. And here she was, feeling better than ever. And after that, the doctors would call her once a year and say, hey, is she still alive? They would call her GP. And can she come in for tests? She didn't want to come in for tests. And now, to this day, it's been 29 years. So I had my mom's game plan. I wasn't working at that point. I was going to chant 2 to 3 hours a day. I was also going to fix all the other imbalances, the eating, the drinking, anything else I could come up with. And another thing my mom did was really to chant with the attitude of, I'm going to overcome this so I can encourage other people. She literally envisioned herself at the Buddhist center telling everybody how she overcame it. And I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do too. I am absolutely not going to accept the diagnosis. I'm not going to accept this so called destiny. And we'll see what happens. And I got into a zone of enjoying the fight. I loved chanting every day. It was so much fun. So, the really fun thing that happened out of all of this, because it was COVID and because we were doing some Zoom chants, which really meant like one person at a time chanting and people kind of chanting just for company. We're all isolated, and this is not normally how people practice. Usually, you chant by yourself or you can chant with a group of people at their home or at the center. But because of COVID, we were all connected on Zoom. So we started some Zoom chanting, which meant, again, one voice at a time. And so many of my friends started joining. And there was so many connections that got deepened. My friend in Vancouver, my friend in England, all of these people that I didn't see regularly because you just don't. Because of COVID and because I was chanting so much, a lot of people were joining these Zooms. And my life just got so rich and so joyful. Every morning was like a Buddhist party. It was all like, hey guys. It was so much fun. I just cannot express that enough. You wouldn't even think I had a problem. The one thing I do have to clarify about those chants, they weren't for my cancer. They weren't for me. They might have begun that way because I had said, hey, I'm going to do 3 hours. And some people said, I want to do it with you. But really, those chants were for the sake of the world and for the sake of everybody's personal struggles during COVID. It was not about me. It was really about each one of us recharging ourselves. So I made sure that whenever we had one of those chants, I had something amazing to read, whether it was from Daisaku Ikeda, Nichiren Daishonin, I had videos. So every morning, it was really like I said, like a Buddhist party. So for the people that joined and who were around at that time, I think we completely changed the impact of COVID. For us, it was all incredible joy, and it was an incredible opportunity to deepen relationships and also to deepen our study of Buddhism. I think everybody's faith and practice got stronger. So that was one amazing outcome of getting sick. And then the other thing was this chance to deepen my faith. And there was a couple of things that I read that just changed everything and that really changed how I lived the experience, how I chanted, and the value I was able to create out of it. So at the very beginning, when I got diagnosed, a friend from France somehow heard that I had cancer, and he sent me this quote, and it was the most perfect thing for me to receive. And he said, I know you know this writing, but I think maybe this could be good. The quote that he sent was from a writing of Nichiren Daishonin's called On Prolonging Life. And it's a writing that Nichiren Daishonin wrote to a woman who was sick. And one of the sections that I really took to heart was where he says, if you are unwilling to make efforts to heal yourself, it will be very difficult to cure your illness. So that was a nice dose of reality. He's basically saying, listen, lady, even if you're a Buddhist and even if you practice, if you are unwilling to make efforts for your health, it's going to be very tough. So I really took that to heart. And the second part that I loved is this. He says, a single life is worth more than the major world system. You still have many years ahead of you. And moreover, you have encountered the Lotus Sutra. If you live even one day longer, you can accumulate that much more benefit. How truly precious your life is. To this day, this quote moves me. I can do 5 takes and it will still move me. I think the reason is that it brings back that time. It brings back that moment of completely feeling hopeful and completely feeling determined and feeling that there was meaning to why I was reading this particular quote. It was almost like a little message from the universe, like a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You're going to be fine. He does say you still have many years ahead of you and you practice. And more importantly, try to appreciate every single day of your life. So this was something that I completely based that period of time on. Practical actions, confidence in the future of my life, and appreciating every single day like an absolute treasure. So that was one incredibly important thing that I read. So in addition to On Prolonging Life, I also had another quote right beside me every single time I chanted. And this was from President Ikeda quoting President Toda, the second president of the Soka Gakkai. And he says, my mentor, Jose Toda, told a member grappling with adversity, as the Daishonin says, in the face of hardship, the wise will rejoice while the foolish will retreat. You mustn't take the course of the foolish. Use hardship as an opportunity to reflect upon yourself. Practice with strong faith and see what happens. You'll gain 10 times the benefit you have so far. I remember reading that and thinking, I've had so many benefits from my practice. I can't imagine what 10 times the benefit is going to look like. But the more important part of that was that when you face hardship, it is foolish to just back off. The most important thing is actually to face it and move forward. He says you mustn't take the course of the foolish. That would just be ridiculous. And he also says to use hardship as an opportunity to reflect upon yourself. So, this illness, this diagnosis, there is value in it. It is a chance to reflect upon myself, reflect on life, and expand my life and achieve a new level of growth and strength. He also says, now in these difficult times is when we need to courageously challenge ourselves, chanting the lion's roar of Daimoku in high spirits so we can experience the unrivaled power of the mystic law that assures us that no prayer remains unanswered. And when I read that, I was like, absolutely, I want to experience the unrivaled power of the mystic law. And when do you experience it? When you're faced with impossible situations. I really think faith is for making the impossible to possible. Possible to possible, you don't need faith for that. You don't need like spiritual strength or the ability to envision your life differently. You don't. If it's possible, you just do the work and it happens. But when you're faced with a situation that makes you feel small, disempowered, fearful, and it seems to be out of your control, it is one incredible thing to have an aspect of it where you are 100% in control. I think that that was one of the greatest joys and gifts of going through cancer as a Buddhist, is that there was a piece of this that I had control over. I can control how I felt, how I moved through it, what I did with it, who I encouraged, what value I created out of it. And I promise you, it was one of the most happiest times of my life ever. If you ask me, would I prefer my life before the cancer or after the cancer? Every single time I will say after the cancer. I wouldn't trade that cancer for anything in terms of what I got from it, how I was afterwards, the joy that I experienced during it. So there's another person that I have to mention that was an inspiration in all of this. Her name was Andrea, and she had breast cancer as well, a more serious version than the one I had. And her attitude was unbelievable. She was so happy and joyful and like had such an incredible spirit. If some of her friends would come over and they would like cry because they were upset about her condition, and she'd be like, don't do that around me. Take that away. Like, you can do that at home, but keep that to yourself, because she didn't want to be around that. That's not how she felt. The other thing that was really amazing about her was she carried this incredibly joyful fighting spirit right to the end. So even when she had to have brain cancer treatment because the cancer had spread to her brain, she had this metal contraption on her head, and she sent me a picture from the hospital saying, hey, look at my crown. And I just thought, wow, that's what I want to be like. I want to die the way I lived, you know? So she was my example. I thought, I want to go through it the way she did. Now, she did pass away in the end. Buddhists do die, and they do die of cancer. So to me, it's not really about whether you die or not. It's just about how you lived and whether you let that illness alter the course of your life, if you let it change your character, change your nature, if you will let it diminish your enjoyment of life. And I know and, and I know not everybody can be like this. We're all wired a little bit different. Not everybody is going to be bouncing around in doctors' offices making jokes. I think that's a lot to ask of everybody. But the part that I do want to share, and everybody can do, is change their attitude a little bit about the portion of an illness that they have some control over. And the Buddhist practice piece allows us to completely transform that piece of it. So I just want to say a few words about what illness is not from the perspective of Buddhism. It is not punishment. It is not failure. It is not shame. It is not weak faith. And it is not bad karma. And it is not loss. That is not what illness is about. There's an essay from Daisaku Ikeda where it's like, we should never look at our illness with abhorrence, like it's some horrible, evil thing within our body. In my case, I started to have compassion for the cancer cells in my body. I just thought, oh, they don't really want the mission to kill me, do they? Like, so I was just like chanting for all of my cells, my whole body. And now, if illness is not these things, then what is it? So let's look at the value of illness. This is much more exciting. I'm going to give you 6 points, 6 ways that it can actually add value to your life. So the first one, it allows us to go beyond superficial concerns, deepen relationships, question life, and approach life in a new and fresh way with deeper gratitude. It gives us a mind that seeks the way. It allows us to question life and want to understand it and experience it more deeply. That's number one. So, number two, it allows us to develop a deep inner strength that is not dependent on the external circumstances. And that is something you get to keep. And I can say I still have that. 5 years later, there is an aspect of my life that remains unflinching to what is around me. So the third point is that it allows us to encourage others, which is one of the reasons for this podcast. So if there's anything in this that encourages one person, I am over the moon, because then that becomes an added value of my own cancer. The fourth point is that it is an opportunity to change our destiny. So maybe our life was going this direction, but when the illness happened and we take the full opportunity of what it gives us to transform all these things, to question, to change our habits, to change our relationships, we have now moved our life in a different direction that is more valuable, more satisfying, more joyful. So the fifth point is it allows us to be more compassionate in nature. There's nothing like a challenge or suffering or adversity to expand our hearts. Of course, there's some people who could get more resentful or grumpy, but I'm talking about people that are actually practicing Buddhism. And all the people I know have often used that kind of a challenge to become even greater people. And the sixth point is that it is an opportunity for human revolution. So that is a term in this practice, and it means inner transformation that causes a change in our outer environment. So it means that by me changing, I have an impact on my family, my work environment, my community, and ultimately the world. So, what all of this means is that illness does not have to be something to be feared or dreaded. It can be the beginning of an incredibly valuable time in our lives. And I remember that was one of the first things my mom said. She's like, the first thing to do is overcome the fear, and then you can do everything else. So, for this last part of the podcast, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the power of chanting. And Nichiren states, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is like the roar of a lion. What sickness can therefore be an obstacle? Now, from the beginning of my practice, I have absolutely loved this imagery. I like cats, I love big cats, and I love this idea that Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is my personal roar. It's my way of summoning up my energy and influencing the world around me. And there's this scene in an old Tina Turner movie where she sits down to chant for the very first time after a horrific experience, and her friend is teaching her to chant, and she's just sitting there going Nam Yoho Renge Kyo through her tears. She can't even get the words out. Next edit, all of a sudden she's Nam Yoho Renge Kyo. Next edit, Nam Yoho Renge Kyo, Nam Yoho Renge Kyo, Nam Yoho Renge Kyo. She's in full lioness mode. Hear her roar. And it's after that she's able to get out of her abusive marriage. It's not so much about the movie as it is that those edits and those scenes capture what many of us do over and over again when we're faced with a difficult situation. We sit down and maybe we can barely chant, and then suddenly we start to get our energy back. And in the end, we get up with the full power of our roar. Now, in terms of chanting about illness, there's just a couple of points that I would recommend doing. So, number one, chant earnestly and persistently. It's really important to focus and chant earnestly. If I'm just scrolling on my phone or going, Nam myo renge kyo, what am I having for dinner? I wouldn't call that earnest. And in terms of volume of chanting, there's no rules on that. But you can imagine that if you're fighting for your life, 5 minutes a day might not cut it. So you really have to think about, what is this problem worth? How much am I willing to chant to overcome this problem? What is it worth to me? I think that's a really good question to ask yourself. Now, the other important point is to really chant that whatever treatment you're getting has maximum efficacy, that whatever it is that you're receiving, that your body accepts it and really yields the maximum benefit. And a third thing is to really chant for your enlightened nature to come out, to really bring out your Buddhahood. That's the best antidote for any vampire effects or any devil of illness. When you're really centered on your enlightened nature and you're connecting with that aspect of your life that's in complete equilibrium with the universe, it will have a tremendous effect and you will be able to enjoy the experience. And finally, if you base your struggle with illness on faith in the mystic law, in the law of the universe, and connect it with an incredibly powerful sense of mission and a vow for Kozen Rufu, which is essentially a vow to work for peace on this planet, you will absolutely be able to transform all poison into medicine. So I think those aspects of chanting are important. So regular, passionate chanting for treatment, chanting for doctors, really bringing out that enlightened nature, having a sense of mission and purpose and value. Those were all aspects of the prayers that I had. So the finale of my story is that just as I thought it was over, at the very last phase, there was a new lump on my thyroid. Now, the beauty of that is that I was able to ask for a second opinion. And who did I ask for? I asked for the doctor that saved my mother's life. And it was the most incredible benefit. And I remember asking my endocrinologist, can I go talk to this doctor 28 years later at the time? And she said, sure, he's still at that hospital. And she said, sure, he's still practicing. And I remember calling my husband, being so excited. I was like, guess what? Guess who I'm gonna go see? And he was like, are you sure that's wise? It's been 28 years. You really want him operating on your neck? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. I need to go see him. So I went to go see him. I ended up being fine. It's all fine. But what ended up happening on that day is I walked in all excited. He's nice and calm and cool. I mean, specialists are scientists, they're not like overly dramatic or emotional. So I come in there and I said, what I really want to talk to you about is something that happened 28 years ago. And I remember him looking at me like, what did I do 28 years ago? And then I said to him, I wanted to thank you for saving my mother's life 28 years ago. And he kind of looked at me like, okay, whatever. I've been saving lives for 28 years. Like, he didn't say much. And then I said, she's the one that. And I motioned to my neck, showing the size of her original cancer. And he just went, Emma Kosjan? And I just said, yes. And he's like, Emma Kosjan? And like, yes, that's my mom. And he said, I have been lecturing on your mother's cancer this whole time. Every single one of his classes gets to see a picture of the horrific cancer that my mother had and the kind of surgery that he did at the time. So that surgery he performed at that time has been taught to hundreds of doctors and has helped save the lives of many people. So everything that my mother went through 28 years ago has benefited many, many people ever since. And that is the ultimate poison into medicine, because her struggle turned into medicine for so many people for decades. And the other thing I said to him was that I know she was difficult and she didn't want to come back and do a particular treatment. And he said, it's probably better that way. We don't even do that treatment anymore. So that was the second part. And the final validation was when I told him that I had gone to a medical conference through my work, I had met an oncologist, I had told him about my mother's case, and that oncologist had said, with the type of cancer that your mother had, most people don't live past 4 years. And this surgeon grabbed my arm and he said, no, 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 no. The kind of cancer your mother had, nobody lives more than 6 months. So this is real. I have the receipts. I have the names. This is all legit. I know it sounds a little unbelievable, but that's the power of our lives. And that's the power of chanting. And that's the power of having an incredible philosophy and practice. So I'm going to close with reading that quote about health again. Health is not simply the absence of illness. Real health is the will to overcome every form of adversity and use even the worst of circumstances as a springboard for new growth and development. Simply put, the essence of health is the constant renewal and rejuvenation of life. And real happiness does not mean the absence of troubles, but rather the refusal to be defeated by them, which is the true definition of happiness. And I wish you this version of health and this version of happiness. So have a really great week, and thank you so much for listening.